This is part 2 of the Oera Linda book, and I'll be continuing on with more information and connections regarding the Oera Linda book. So in Genesis 10 we have the prophecy given to Noah's sons. Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech and Tyrus. In Tyrus we have the Tyrians, I believe, Gog, Magog, we know to be the Khazarian people, and Ashkenaz. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim and Dodanim. From these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into the lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families and their nations. So they were given the lands, they were given the coastlands mainly. In the prophecy of Gog and Magog, it's chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. So Gog, Magog, Meshech, Tubal and Ashkenaz were clearly the tribes that the armies of the dragon, who I believe is the Edomite people, the Herod people, who convert these people to what we know today as Talmudic Judaism. It is not the Israelite faith, it's of the Babylonian faith, who was the sons of Ham. Nimrod, Babylon, was the son of Ham. That being said, I found historically that the Edomites were a combination of Ishmaelites or Arabs and Phoenicians, or as you might want to call them, Tyrians, as they united their peoples together at the time of the exile of the southern kingdom of Israel to Babylon. So if you look in the picture I posted above before, the gods of Edom and the gods of the Melkart, the Phoenician Tyrian, has a triple horn, and it's pretty much the same god. And how they were connected and united was through the incense or spice road and the sea trade of the Phoenicians. The spice road came up from India through Arabia into Petra, which was then ruled by the Edomites and later the Nabateans, and then up through into what is now known as Lebanon and to the Phoenicians. It's said that Javan was the father of the Greek people, so therefore if the people of the Oera Linda book were of these people, I believe the coastland people, they would have been the sons of Javan. If we look at the Strong's Concordance translation of the word the coast or the regions there, it's from the 339E coast region, from the unused word coast region, coastlands and the islands. They were the sea people. When these pretend prisoners had learned our language, they persuaded the dukes and the nobles that they should become subject to the Magi, that then their sons would succeed to them without having to be elected. Those who, by their good deeds, had gained a piece of land in front of their house, they promised on their side should receive in addition a piece behind. Those who had got a piece before and behind should have a rondel, a complete circuit. And those who had a rondel should have a whole freehold. The seniors were true to Freya, then they changed their course and turned to the degenerate sons. Yesterday there were among you those who would have called the whole people together to compel the eastern states to return to their duty. According to my humble opinion, they would have made a great mistake. Suppose that there was a very serious epidemic among the cattle. Would you run the risk of sending your own healthy cattle among the sick ones? Certainly not. Everyone must see that doing that would turn out very badly for the whole of the cattle. Who then would be so imprudent as to send their children among a people who wholly depraved? If I were to give you any advice, I would be close to choose a new Volksmorder. I know that you are in a difficulty about it because out of the 13 Burgmaden that we still have remaining, 8 are candidates of the dignity, but I should pay no attention to that. If we look at the history of the Khazars, even when they are defeated by the Russians, it's the same story. They go into people's nations and they destroy them, they murder them, and they bring their occultish, evil Babylonian religion with them. And they have a history of corrupting people via offering incentives or through minority agendas. Tuntia, the Bergmad of Medesblick, who is not a candidate, is a person of knowledge and sound sense, and quite as attached to our people as our custom, as all the rest together. I should further recommend that you should visit all the citadels and write down all the laws of Freya's text, as well as the histories and all that is written on the walls, in order that they may not be destroyed with the citadels. So we can see these people have a matriarchal system. The Israelites have a patriarchal system. It stands written that the Volksmorder and the Bergmad shall have assistants and messengers, 21 maidens and 7 apprentices. If I might add one more, I would recommend that all the respectable girls in the town should be taught, for I say positively, and time will show it, that if you wish to remain true children of Freya, never be vanquished by fraud or arms. You must take care to bring up your daughters as true Freya's daughters. You must teach your children how great our country has been, what great men our forefathers were, how great we still are if we compare ourselves to others. You must tell them of the sea heroes, of their mighty deeds and distant voyages. All these stories must be told by the fireside and in the field, wherever it may be, in times of joy or sorrow. And if you wish to impress it on the brains and the hearts of your sons, you must let it flow through the lips of your wives and your daughters. Adela's advice was followed. These are the Gertmen under whose direction this book is composed. So there's a few names here that tie in with other ancient texts. So we've got Apol, and we know that Minerva, one of the Berg maidens, is related to Greece. She gets in a ship and she moves to Athens. And Apol, or Apollo, is in ancient Greek mythology. Here it's saying that this is a name that's used within these communities, or possibly was a real Frisian person. So Adela's husband, 3 times a sea king, Apol, Gertman of Ostfriesland and Linduriden. The towns Lugarda, Lindhem and Stavia are under his care. So they're talking about a time when these tribes from the east are coming in and trying to take over and destroy their community. Now if we look at Apollo, it says Apollo descended from the she-wolf, wolf-like lord of the storehouse, lord of the sun, distant deadly archer. So Apollo is the divine child carried in his mother's arms to Delphi, where he slew its guardian serpent. Some see vestiges of Apollo and Leto in Madonna and child iconography. So this is going back to this mother-child religion again. A beautiful woman holding a radiant divine child stands upon a dead, or at least extremely suppressed, serpent. And this goes back to Adam again. We have the rebus standing on the dragon. Now the rebus is the twin or the androgyne, male and the female Adam in the occult theology. And when we look at Apollo, he was a twin. Apollo was the twin with Artemis, whose their mother was Leto. So it says where his mother Leto, one of Zeus's many conquests, was hiding from Hera, Zeus's jealous wife. However, Apollo is also described as coming from Hyperborea, a land to the north. Alternative myths suggest that Apollo and his mother arrived in Greece together in the form of wolves, or that Leto, in the form of a pregnant wolf, made the trek alone, giving birth to Apollo in Greece. So we have this wolf story, this mythology again in Rome. The wolf, the mother wolf that gives milk to the twin boys, Romulus and Remus, twins again. And There's also a link with twins and with the wolf, the tribe of Benjamin. So Benjamin is seen as a wolf in biblical symbology. He's also associated with Gemini in the Mazzaroth, and the twin Gemini is the twin symbols. So Hyperborea's location has never been identified, nor is it clear if it is even an actual physical destination or a spirit realm. One theory suggests that it is the extreme north near the Arctic Circle. Another suggests that Apollo comes from Rügen Island in the Baltic. He first encountered the Greeks via amber trade routes. Alternatively, he is originally a Hittite spirit from Anatolia, Asia Minor. So Asia Minor is where the Ark landed and the original people spread out upon the earth. Perhaps the underlying reason for his support of neighbouring Troy. And when we think of Hyperborea, we look at Henry Kissinger's book, World Order, and he specifically signals in on the land of Hyperborea and Tartaria. So here's an enlarged picture. Above that is Henry Kissinger, below is Hyperborea, below Hyperborea is Tartaria, and the World Order. So the Tartarian world order is a Khazarian world order. And if we consider that Hyperborea is the world before the flood, then we might consider that Tartaria is the re-establishment of Cain's kingdom before the flood. And there's no way that this can be a coincidence, as he would have had to have known what was on the front cover of his own book. So it was Freya's day, and 7 times 7 years had elapsed since Festa was appointed Vogsmorda by the desire of Freya. 7 times 7 is a jubilee. So here we have another association with the Israelite people. They've got a jubilee, or Freya's day. The citadel of Medesblick was ready and Bergamard was chosen. Festa was about to light her new lamp. And when she had done so in the presence of all the people, Freya called her from her watchtower so that everyone could hear it. Festa, take your style and write the things that I may not speak. Festa did as she was bid, and thus we became Freya's children and our earliest history began. Alright, so here we have Mother Goddess, symbolism. So this is a matriarchal system. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Seems to work for them. But we've got Freya, the mother of all of the Frisian people, and she's in her watchtower. So she's up in heaven in her watchtower. She's the queen of heaven. And I just want to show some similarities here between Freya and the Mother Goddess. So here we have the 8-pointed star of Inanna or Ishtar. She's the Mother Goddess. We have the 8-pointed star here with the moon and the sun. I pointed out in my other videos exactly what this means. Here we have the goddess Inanna from Sumeria riding the back of a lion, or has the lion at her feet. No, the Sumerians and the Assyrians were not the same civilization, though they both inhabited Mesopotamia. So we have Neo-Assyria as well as ancient Assyria. We've got to remember they both come from the Sumerians. So the Sumerians were far earlier, dating back as early as 4000 BCE, and can themselves be subdivided into various city-states, which were often in conflict with one another. The Assyrians arose much later, originating perhaps around 2000 BCE. So what I'm saying here is that these are the people of Japheth, the Syrian, the Assyrian, the Egyptian, the people of Ham, the Israelite, the people of Shem. Inanna is an ancient Mesopotamian goddess associated with love, war, beauty, sex, justice, and political power. She was originally worshipped in Sumer under the name Inanna, and later by the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians under the name Ishtar. She was known as the Queen of Heaven and was the patron goddess of Eanna, temple of the city of Uruk, which was her main cult center. Inanna, also known as Ishtar in Akkadian mythology, as a goddess associated with the morning and evening star, Venus. Heket, the frog goddess. Nibiru, She is viewed as both an independent, powerful, and central figure, but also as a young girl under patriarchal control. Goddess is also noted for her dual nature, her feminine as well as her masculine traits. Inanna is an ancient Mesopotamian goddess associated with love, war, beauty, sex. A chlorite bowl from the temple of Inanna in Nippur depicts a large feline battling a giant snake, and a cuneiform inscription on the bowl reads Inanna and the serpent, indicating that the cat is supposed to represent the goddess. So according to the creation story of the Oera Linda, we have Rolda, who alone is eternal and good, made the beginning. Then commenced time. Time wrought all things, even the earth. The earth bore grass, herbs, and trees, all useful and all noxious animals. All that is good and useful she brought forth by day, and all that is bad and injurious by night. So the earth is referred to as she. After the 12th Yule Fest, she brought forth 3 maidens. So the earth brought forth 3 maidens. No Adam. Lyda out of fierce heat, Finda out of strong heat, and Freya out of moderate heat. When the last came into existence, Rolda breathed his spirit upon her in order that men might be bound to him. As soon as they were full grown, they took pleasure and delight in the visions of Rolda. So what it's saying here is that the earth created 3 women, and one of them, Freya, was given the spirit of Rolda, like Eve. Hatred found its way among them. They each bore 12 sons and 12 daughters, at every Yule time a couple. So the twin symbolism again. How they brought forth 12 sons and 12 daughters, I'm not sure, because there's no man associated here. Thence come all mankind. Lyda was black, with hair curled like a lamb's. Her eyes shone like stars and shot out glances like those of a bird of prey. Lyda was acute. She could hear a snake glide and could smell a fish in the water. Lyda was strong and nimble. She could bend a large tree, yet when she walked, she did not bruise a flower stalk. Lyda was violent. Her voice was loud, and when she screamed in anger, every creature quailed. Sounds a little bit like the Sasquatch. Wonderful Lyda, she had no regard for laws. Her actions were governed by her passions. To help the weak, she would kill the strong, and when she had done it, she would weep by their bodies. Poor Lyda, she turned grey in her mad behaviour, and at last she died, heartbroken by the wickedness of her children. Foolish children. They accused each other of their mother's death. They howled and fought like wolves, and while they did this, the birds devoured the corpse. Who can refrain from tears at such a recital? Just bringing up the Sasquatch too, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have Enkidu. And Enkidu is, what I believe, a perfect depiction of a Sasquatch. So I'm wondering if there is some truth in this ancient story, that there were other people in the garden of God. Finda was yellow. Her hair was like the mane of a horse. She could not bend a tree, but where Lyda killed 1 lion, she killed 10. Finda was seductive. Her voice was sweeter than any bird's. Her eyes were alluring and enticing, but whoever looked upon them became her slave. So she was a people of slavery. And we know who they are, don't we? Finda was unreasonable. She wrote thousands of laws, but she never obeyed one. And we know who rules our system today, with multiple laws and loopholes in their Talmudic texts. But she never obeyed one. She despised the frankness of the good and gave herself up to flatteries. That was her misfortune. Her head was too full, but her heart was too vain. She loved nobody but herself, and she wished that all should love her. False Finda, honey sweet were her words, but those who trusted them found sorrow at hand. Selfish Finda, she wished to rule everybody, and her sons were like her. They made their sisters serve them, and they slew each other for the mastery. So, what do we have this in the Jewish prayer? Every man prays first. Thank God that he was not made a woman. He was not made a slave. And he was not made a goy. So they treat their women as lesser beings. They make slaves of people. And they consider themselves superior to the people they make slaves out of. Treacherous Finda. One word would irritate her, and the cruelest deed did not affect her. If she saw a lizard swallow a spider, she shuddered, but if she saw her children kill a Frisian, her bosom swelled with pleasure. Isn't this the law of the Talmud? Unfortunate Finda, she died in her bloom of her age, and the mode of her death is unknown. Hypocritical children, her corpse was buried under a costly stone. Pompous inscriptions are written on it, and loud lamentations were heard at it, but in private not a tear was shed. Despicable people, the laws of Finda established were written on gold tablets, but the object for which they were made was never attained. The good laws were abolished, and selfishness instituted bad ones in their place. O Finda, then the earth overflowed with blood, and your children were mown down like grass. Yes, Finda, those were the fruits of your vanity. Look down from your watchstar and weep. Freya was white like the snow at sunrise, and the blue of her eyes vied with the rainbow. Beautiful Freya, like the rays of the sun shone the locks of her hair, which were as fine as spiders' webs. Clever Freya, when she opened her lips, the birds ceased to sing and the leaves to quiver. Powerful Freya, at the glance of her eye, the lion lay down at her feet, and the adder withheld his poison. Okay, let's have a look at this. Here we have Inanna with the lion at her feet. Here we have Inanna with a serpent rod in her hand and a lion at her feet. What looks like a lion at her feet. And just for fun, here we have Katy Perry pretending to be Inanna riding a lion. All the depictions of Inanna. And here we have Inanna in the Freemasonry depicted as Lucifer, Venus, the bright morning star, Jacob's ladder to heaven. Sometime over 5,000 years ago, the world's first known scribe pressed cuneiform characters into damp clay, and writing was born. Much of the Sumerian literary oeuvre is religious in nature. Gods and goddesses abound in the life of the average Sumerian, befitting a culture in which women had more rights than in many subsequent generations. The goddess Inanna ranked among the most important and beloved of the deities. Child of the moon, god Nana, known as the Queen of Heaven and Earth, countless poems sang of Inanna's power and glory. Not surprisingly, a youthful Inanna appears in the best known of the ancient Near East epics, the Gilgamesh cycle. She plays a large and particularly intriguing part in the episode Gilgamesh, Enkidu and the Netherworld. See Samuel Noah Kramer's The Sumerian 74-75 and Diane Walkstein and Samuel Noah Kramer's Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Her Stories and Hymns for Suma 49. But who, you might ask, puts in an appearance besides the adventurer, Gilgamesh, and the awe-inspiring Inanna? Fascinatingly enough, the answer is Lilith. The halupu tree growing beside the Euphrates River is washed away in a high wind. Inanna retrieves the tree, takes it to Uruk, and cares for it. As the years of tending the tree pass, Inanna wonders when she will be granted her full power as a goddess, symbolized by a throne and a bed, which will be constructed from the special tree. But Inanna is shocked and saddened to discover that 3 creatures live in the tree: a serpent in its roots, a bird in its branches, and the dark maid Lilith in its trunks. Inanna calls her on her brother Utu, the sun god, for help, but he turns away. Is that her brother Apollo, maybe? I don't know. She then calls on the hero Gilgamesh, who is also referred to as brother, and he comes to the rescue, striking the serpent so that it slithers away. The bird and Lilith flee as well. Next, Gilgamesh uproots the tree, and finally, the tree's wood he makes the throne and bed for Inanna. Now, you'll notice in this picture of Gilgamesh, like Inanna, he has a lion under his arm, so he is more powerful than the lion, and he has the serpent in his hand, so he also controls the serpents, or they don't bite him. So historically, Nimrod is known as Gilgamesh. Nimrod the rebel may also be known by the name of Gilgamesh. in an ancient epic. Gilgamesh was a demigod for Uruk, which is biblical Erech and modern-day Iraq. According to Genesis 10, the beginning of Nimrod's kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Genesis 10:10. Gilgamesh was eager to make a name for himself and set out on adventure with his half-animal, half-human hybrid friend, Enkidu, in order to ask Utanapishtim, a survivor of the flood, the secret of immortality. And when we look at the Sumerian and the Assyrian and the Persian mythologies, we see that the secret of immortality is the star in the wings and the Soma drink, which is the drink of immortality. So what's interesting here in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it says Horus, in ancient Egyptian religion, a god in the form of a falcon, whose right eye was the sun or the morning star, representing power and quintessence, and whose left eye was the moon or evening star. So we can see this Freemasonic picture depicted here. Obviously the third eye in the middle is Venus. The third eye is the path to enlightenment, or the Jacob's ladder to heaven. And we look at this in the context of taking Soma, or reaching immortality, or having a otherworld experience. Then we can see that the idea of immortality is a resurrection or a near-death type experience. For example, the pharaoh who was Horus, the falcon god, like the sun, would die and be resurrected again in the new pharaoh. And it's been recorded, especially in the book The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, that Nimrod and Semiramis and their child was one and the same with Isis, Osiris, and Horus, and that these religions have been replicated in the empires of the earth. So what's interesting is that Inanna is associated with all of these things as well. She's associated with the morning star. She's associated with the Eye of Ra. And also Horus, the falcon, is associated with the sun god. And so is Apollo. Falcon cults, which were in evidence from late pre-dynastic times, were widespread in Egypt. It says here, Horus was later identified by the Greeks with Apollo, and the town of Idfu was called Apollonopolis, Apollo's town during the Greco-Roman period. So again, we have these, like the Hindu gods or the god of the Vedas, they have both a female and male version of themselves. And the Horus story is simply the Nimrod story, or the Semiramis story, the mother-father-child story that goes through every single religion on earth. Also, remember that the tree, which here sounds like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because the serpent's in the tree, right? The tree is known as a man or a king. Throughout this myth is made clear that Inanna longs wistfully for the powers that are rightfully hers. So the earliest representations of Lilith seem to be a great winged bird goddess, a wind spirit, or one associated with the Sumerian Ninlil, goddess of the grain and wife of Enlil. As the hand of Inanna, Lilith was notorious for bringing men from the street and field of war to Inanna's temple for holy sexual rites, in which the intention was to civilize the people. That sacred sexual custom where in fact consisted the greatest gift of Inanna. As Adam's first wife, however, Lilith really got into trouble with the patriarchy. She had the audacity to want to be treated as Adam's equal. According to Hebrew mythology, the Babylonian Talmud, and the Zohar and alphabet of Ben Sira, so no, not Hebrew mythology, according to Talmudic Judaistic mythology, because we cannot find this story in the Hebrew Bible. Lilith refused to lie below Adam and thus set the archetypal example of later feminists. God allegedly threatened her by decreeing if she did not submit to Adam, that 100 of her children would die every day. Lilith chose exile. Perhaps this is tied in with the feminist love of abortion, because Lilith chose her freedom over her children's death. And here I found an image online. We fund abortion, and we have the Lilith Fund for Reproductive Equity. Now we know who funds that, don't we? So in this relief here, we have what they're saying is Inanna. She's standing on the lions. She has owls by her side. Some people say this is Lilith as well. I've seen this depicted as Lilith, but it's saying here, and going on her standing on the lion, I would say it's Inanna. In this image, we have Athena pictured with her owl. And if we go on the text of the Oera Linda, then Athena was a Frisian bergmaid who, via sea travel, moved a colony of Frisians to Athens, became the female goddess of the city in the Greek tradition. What was the role of the priest and priestess in ancient Greece? Priesthood played an important role in many ancient societies, although many ancient priests and priestesses had very much in common. Sometimes their duties varied depending on which ancient god they served. In ancient Greece, both men and women could become priests and priestesses. In most cases, it was custom that priests were the same sex as the god they served. Most women who became priestesses were either virgins or beyond childbearing age. So this ties in with the Oera Linda mothers, or the Vestal virgins. In order to become free of harm, ancient Greek priests and priestesses wore a sacred headband. Their main duties were to carry out religious ceremonies and prayers. So though ancient Greeks worshipped a number of gods, the most important gods were the Olympian gods led by Zeus. These were Athena, Apollo, Poseidon, Hermes, Hera, Aphrodite, Artemis, Demeter, Ares, Hades, Hephaestus, and Dionysus. These gods were believed to reside on Mount Olympus. Gods were worshipped at sacred sites and temples in all major Greek communities, and ceremonies carried out by priests and their attendants. So the eternal flame is the same first flame Prometheus stole from the gods and gave to humans, keeping it in the underworld as the only place it could not be destroyed. It represents all humanity has done of hundreds of years and the spirit that keeps them alive. The eternal flame is a flame, lamp, or torch that burns for indefinite time. Most eternal flames are ignited and tended intentionally, but some are natural phenomena caused by natural gas leaks. In ancient times, eternal flames were fueled by wood or olive oil. The eternal fire is a long-standing tradition in many cultures and religions. In ancient Iran, an altar was tended by a dedicated priest and represent the concept of divine sparks, or Amesha Spenta, as understood in Zoroastrianism. Period sources indicate that 3 great fires existed in the Archimedean era of Persian history, which are collectively considered the earliest reference to the practice of creating ever-burning community fires. The eternal flame was a component of the Jewish religious rituals performed in the tabernacle and later in the Temple of Jerusalem, where a commandment required a fire to burn continuously upon the outer altar. Modern Judaism continues a similar tradition by having a sanctuary lamp. So one of the 3 great flames of the Archimedean Empire was extinguished during the reign of Alexander the Great to honor the death of his close friend Hephaestion in 324 BC. So the Hebrew Bible commands that the fire ever be burned upon the altar. It shall never go out, in Leviticus 6:5. Regarding the altar of the burnt offering in the tabernacle, the sacred fire of Vesta in ancient Rome, which burned within the temple of Vesta and the Roman Forum, the mystery of the ancient eternal flame, so the existence of mysterious lamps that can supposedly burn for centuries, millennia or more, perhaps even eternal without any human intervention, has been mentioned since far back in history. From many parts of the world, such tales particularly prevalent from Egypt. It was believed by the Egyptians that the dead required some source of light to guide them to the underworld, as well as to keep away evil spirits that would try and hinder their journey or harm them. And to this end, the ancient Egyptians were said to have routinely sealed some sort of lamp or light source within the tombs, but archaeologists and Egyptologists agree that there is no evidence for open flame sources, as no residue or scorch marks have been found within these darkened chambers that would point to traditional torches. So the Greek biographer and essayist Plutarch once wrote of an ever-burning lamp situated over the entrance of the temple of Jupiter Ammon in Egypt, which he claimed was unable to be extinguished by wind, rain, any other force, and which the priests of the temple had claimed had burned steadily for centuries. Since the unremembered, the temple of Apollo, Carneus at Cyrene, and the great temple of Adobain in Armenia were said to have similar ever-burning eternal lamps. Classical Greek writer Pausanias also wrote of a lamp kept at the temple of Minerva Polias in Athens that could remain burning for years without refueling. So here we have Athena, the eternal flame, and in the Oera Linda book we have the Bergmad with the lamp and the fire, the eternal flame. Pure Freya, her food was honey, her beverage was dew gathered from the cups of the flowers. Sensible Freya, the first lesson that she taught her children was self-control, and the second was the love of virtue. When they were grown, she taught them the value of liberty, Lady Liberty, for she said, without liberty all other virtues serve to make you slaves, and to disgrace your origin. Generous Freya, she never allowed metal to be dug from the earth for her own benefit, but when she did, it was for the general use. Most happy Freya, like the starry host in the firmament, her children clustered around her. Wise Freya, when she had seen her children reach the 7th generation, she summoned them all to Freyland and there gave them her text, saying, "Let this be your guide, and it can never go ill with you." Exalted Freya, when she had thus spoken, the earth shook like the sea of Rolda. The ground of Freyland sunk beneath her feet. The air was dimmed by tears, and when they looked for her, for their mother, she was already risen to her watching star. Then at length thunder burst from the clouds, and lightning wrote upon the firmament, "Watch." Far-seeing Freya, the land from which she had risen, was now a stream, and except her text, all that was in it was overwhelmed. Obedient children, when they came to themselves again, they made this high mound and built the citadel upon it, and on the walls they wrote the text. And that everyone should be able to find it, they called the land about it Texland. Therefore, it shall remain as long as the earth shall be the earth. Prosperity awaits the free. At last they shall see me again. Through him only can I recognize as free, who is neither a slave to another nor to himself. This is my counsel. So this is Freya's text. When in desire, distress, and when mental and physical energy avail nothing, then have recourse to the spirit of Rolda. But do not appeal to him before you have tried all other means. For I tell you beforehand, and time will prove this truth, that those who give way to discouragement sink under their burdens. To Rolda spirit only shall you bend the knee in gratitude thricefold for what you have received, for what you do receive, and for the hope of aid in time of need. You have seen how speedily I have come to your assistance. Do likewise to your neighbor, but wait not for his entreaties. The suffering would curse you. My maidens would erase your name from the book, and I will regard you as a stranger. Let not your neighbor express his thanks to you on bended knee, which is only due to Rolda spirit. Envy would assail you, wisdom would ridicule you, and my maidens would accuse you of irreverence. 4 things are given for your enjoyment: air, water, land, and fire. But Rolda is the sole possessor of them. Therefore, my counsel to you is choose upright men who will fairly divide the labor and the fruits, so that no man shall be exempt from work or from the duty of defense. If ever it should happen that one of your people should sell his freedom, he is not of you. He is a bastard, I counsel you to expel him and his mother from the land. Repent this to your children, morning, noon, and night, till they think of it in their dreams. If any man shall deprive another, even his debtor, of his liberty, let him be to you as a vile slave. And I advise you to burn his body and that his mother in an open place, and bury them 50 feet below the ground, so that no grass shall grow upon them. It would poison your cattle. Meddle not with the people of Lida or Finda, because Rhoda would help them, and any injury that you inflict on them would recoil upon your own heads. If you should happen that they come to you for advice or assistance, then it behoves you to help them. But if they should rob you, then fall upon them with fire and sword. If any of them should seek a daughter of yours to wife, she is willing, explain to her her folly, but if she will follow her lover, let her go in peace. If your son wishes for a daughter of theirs, do the same as to your daughter, but let not either one of the other return among you. For you would introduce foreign morals, customs, and if these were accepted by you, it would no longer watch over you. Upon my servant Fasta, I have placed all my hopes, therefore you must choose her for Ermorda. Follow my advice, then she will hereafter remain my servant, as well as all the sacred maidens who succeed her. Then shall the lamp, which I have lighted for you, never be extinguished. Its brightness shall always illuminate your intellect, and you shall always remain as free from foreign domination as your fresh river water is distinct from the salt sea. In Zoroastrian worship, we have the eternal flame. It says Zoroastrian worship practices have evolved from ancient times to the present day. Traditionally, Zoroastrians worship individually at home or in the open, facing a source of light. Zoroastrian scriptures do not prescribe worshipping in a temple and make no mention of Zoroastrian places of worship. In ancient times, historical records state that when community gathered together for a religious event, they did so in open air, gathering areas around a podium where a fire was lit. Gathering areas were on hillsides and hilltops. And doesn't it talk about this in the Bible, about the fires that were lit on the hilltops? Over time, Zoroastrians developed the concept of worshipping in temples, sometimes called fire temples. The temples contain an inner sanctum, pavi, or platform where a fire is maintained or placed. This is because Zoroastrians face a source of light when they pray, just like the Islamic people who face the sun. In temples, the sources of light is a flame maintained in a fire urn. In certain temples, this fire is kept burning continuously, representing an eternal flame. So this has Fasta spoken. All the regulations which have existed a century, that is 100 years, may be the advice of the Ermorda, with the consent of the community, be inscribed upon the walls of the citadel. And when inscribed on the walls, they became laws, and it is our duty to respect them all. If by force or necessity any regulations should be imposed upon us at variance with our laws and customs, we must submit. But should we be released, we must always return to our own again, that is Freya's will, and must be that of all her children. Now, Fasta has a very similar sound to the goddess Hestia. Who was Hestia goddess? The stories of Greek mythology are centered on both mortal heroes and immortal deities to teach an assortment of lessons. When it comes to deities, Greek mythology focuses on the gods and goddesses that control both the earth and the life of man. These stories of these gods and goddesses have been and will continue to be told for centuries. Hestia was born to the Titan gods Kronos and Rhea, which made her the sister to goddess Demeter and Hera, and gods Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. Hestia was one of the original 12 Olympian gods and vowed to keep peace at Olympus. Now, Mount Olympus, the mountain of God, the kingdom of heaven, and we have the 12 children of the 3 women created by the earth, and the one Freya, given the spirit of Rhoda, Innocent and pure, Hestia made a promise to Zeus that she would never marry, as both Poseidon and Apollo wanted to marry her. Hestia chose to remain a virgin for eternity to prevent a war between the two. Zeus rewarded Hestia with a central location of the home. This reward, combined with her virginity, purity, and innocence, made Hestia the god of the home, the hearth, and the family. Hestia means hearth or fireside because she was a pure and innocent virgin who had been given the centralized location in the home. Hestia became associated with the fire and the hearth. Hestia would stay within the home and tend the fire so that it would not go out. To honor Hestia goddess, there was a public hearth in each city that required tending and was never allowed to burn out. As goddess of the hearth, Hestia was a part of cooking and sacrificial rituals. Her responsibility to the fire was rewarded by receiving a portion of the food or offering at the home, as well as serving of wine poured in her name. While she was a virgin, Hestia embodied the importance of domestication within the home. Hestia represented the importance of tending the fire and overseeing cooking and offerings by the fireside. So it was Hestia Fasta. Don't know that, but it ties in with the virgin and the eternal flame. So Fasta said, anything that any man commences, whatever it may be, on the day appointed for Freya's worship shall eternally fail, for time has proved that she was right, and it is become a law that no man shall, except from absolute necessity, keep that day otherwise than as a joyful feast. So these are the laws established for the government of the citadels. Whenever a citadel is built, the lamp belonging to it must be lighted at the original lamp in Textland, and that can only be done by the mother. Every mother shall appoint her own maidens. She may even choose those who are mothers in other towns. The mother of Textland may appoint her own successor, but should she die without having done so, the election shall take place at General Assembly of the whole nation. The mother of Textland may have 21 maidens and 7 assistants, so that there may always be 7 to attend the lamp day and night. She may have the same number of maidens who are mothers in their own towns. If a maiden wishes to marry, she must announce it to the mother and immediately resign her office before her passion shall have polluted the light. For the service of the mother and of each of the burg maidens, there shall be appointed 21 townsmen, 7 civilians of mature years, 7 warriors of mature years, and 7 seamen of mature years. Out of the 7, 3 shall retire every year and shall not be replaced by members of their own family nearer than the 4th degree. Each may have 300 young townsmen as defenders. For this service they must study Freya's texts and the laws. From the sages they must learn wisdom, from the warriors the art of war, and from the sea kings the skill required for distant voyages. Every year 100 of the defenders shall return to their homes, and those that may have been wounded shall remain in the citadel. So I'll leave the laws there. The universal laws are all free-born men are equal, wherefore they must have equal rights on sea and land and on all that world is given. This is really interesting because the law of the sea and the law of the land, they have separated them and used them as a deceptive device to put us under international law. So if you want to check these laws out, they're all good, righteous laws and great laws for society. There's no denying this. And they're all biblical type laws. The difference is that the Oera Linda, the nations that followed these laws, were set up on a system that was opposed to slavery and promoted freedom and sovereignty for all in the community. In early times, almost all the Finns lived together in their native land, which was called Old Land and is now submerged. They were thus far away and we had no wars. When they were driven hitherwards and appeared as robbers, then arose the necessity of defending ourselves, and we had armies, kings, and wars. For all this, there were established regulations, and out of the regulations came fixed laws. So I think that these floods that were spoken of, that drove the Finns westward into the realm of the Frisians. I believe the Finns being mixed or descendants of the Khazarian people, the tribes of Gog and Magog, Ashkenaz. I think they were just moving into these regions, probably, this is just my opinion, but the Frisian people talking about the flood, the land sinking, that separated the people and dispersed them into their own regions of the earth, which is in Genesis 9 and 10. And we have what I believe is proof of this in the Viking history of the Russians that pushed the Khazarian people and destroyed the Khazarian king and empire because of their wickedness. So here's an article on the hidden history of the incredible evil Khazarian mafia. Finland is up here in the north. It says 100 to 800 AD. Now remember that the Oera Linda was written or recopied around the time of 800 AD. Khazarians developed into a nation ruled by an evil king who had ancient Babylonian black arts cult oligarchs serving as his court. During this time, Khazarians became known to surrounding countries as thieves, murderers, road bandits, and for assuming the identities of those travelers, they murdered as a normal occupational practice and way of life. Doesn't this sound like what the Oera Linda is describing the Finns as, or the Magyars? And we have the Magyar of Hungary being associated with the Khazarian Turkic people. The ultimatum is delivered by Russia and surrounding nations. The leaders of the surrounding nations, especially Russia, have had so many years of complaints by the citizens that as a group, they deliver an ultimatum to the Khazarian king. They send a communique to the Khazarian king that he must choose one of three Abrahamic religions for his people. This is the initial story of how the Khazarians chose the Kabbalistic Talmudic Judaism of the traders of the Silk Road as their religion. So in 1200 AD, the Russians led a group of nations surrounding Khazaria and invaded it in order to stop the Khazarian crime against their people, which included the kidnapping of their young children and infants for their blood sacrifice ceremonies to Baal. And it talks in the Oera Linda about the kidnapping of children. In the Oera Linda, they send the children back, having been MK Ultra'd in a sense, having been reprogrammed to destroy the community of the Frisians from within. The Khazarian king and his inner court of criminals and murderers came to be known as the Khazarian Mafia by neighbouring countries. Khazarian leaders had a well-developed spy network through which they obtained prior warning and escaped from Khazaria to European nations to the west, taking their vast fortune with them in gold and silver. They laid low and regrouped while assuming new identities in secret. They continued their satanic childhood blood sacrifice rituals and trusted Baal to give them the whole world and all its riches, as they claimed he had promised them, as long as they kept bleeding out and sacrificing children and infants for him. The Khazarian king and his court mafia plotted eternal revenge against the Russians and surrounding nations and invaded Khazaria and drove them from power. So this was the Viking Russians, the Russians from the north. It wasn't the Khazarian Eastern Russians. What's interesting here in the Oera Linda, they talk about the Finns who give golden amulets to the people to bribe them. And I'll read that in a moment. From Minos' writings, if anyone should be so wicked as to commit robbery, murder, arson, rape, and any other crime upon a neighbouring state, and our people wish to inflict punishment, the culprit shall be put to death in the presence of the offended, in order that no war may arise and the innocent suffer for the guilty. If the offended will spare his life and forgo their revenge, it may be permitted. The culprit should be a king, grefman, or other person in authority. We must make good his fault, but he must be punished. So Minno, he was an ancient sea king. He was a seer and a philosopher, and he gave laws to the Cretans. Minos, in Greek mythology, Minos was a king of Crete, son of Zeus and Europa. Every 9 years he made king Aegus picked 7 young boys and 7 young girls to be sent to Daedalus' creation, the labyrinth, to be eaten by the Minotaur. After the death, Minos became a judge, the dead and the underworld. So we have a connection to the Greek mythology too. From Minos' writings, when Helena, whose real name was Minerva, was well established and the Crecalanders loved her as well as our own people did, there came some princes and priests to her citadel and asked Minerva where her possessions lay. Helena answered, "I carry my possessions in my own bosom. What I've inherited is the love of wisdom, justice, and freedom. If I lose these, I shall become as the least of your slaves. Now I give advice for nothing, but when I should sell it." The gentleman went away laughing and saying, "Your humble servant, wise Helena." So Helen in Greek mythology. Helen is one of the most famous female figures to appear in Greek mythology. Helen was the most beautiful of all mortals and was given the title of the face that launched 1,000 ships, for an Achaean army was arrived after she arrived in Troy with Paris. Helen, daughter of Zeus. The story of Helen starts in Sparta at a time when King Tyndareus ruled it. Tyndareus was married to the beautiful Leda, the daughter of Theseus. The beauty of Leda attracted the attention of Zeus, who came up with a unique way of seducing the Spartan queen. Zeus would transform himself into a magnificent swan and arrange for an eagle to chase him, flew directly into the lap of Leda, imitating a bird in distress. In the form of a swan, Zeus effectively mated with Leda, causing her to become pregnant. On the same day, Leda would also sleep with her husband, and by Tyndareus, she would also fall pregnant. Okay. As a result, Leda would give birth to 4 children, Castor and Pollux, Clytemnestra, and Helen, with Helen and Pollux considered to be the children of Zeus. Some say of how Helen was not born in the normal way, hatching from an egg instead. Alternatively, Leda was just the woman who raised Helen, for in this instance Leda was not the object of Zeus's desire, for it was instead the goddess Nemesis. Nemesis, having no wish to sleep with Zeus, transformed himself into a goose or a swan, and Zeus did likewise, and thus Zeus still had his way with Nemesis. As a result, laid an egg, which then passed into the care of Leda. We have the world egg described here, or the mother goddess maternal cosmic egg. Helen is, of course, famous for being taken by Paris of Troy, but this was not the first abduction of Helen. For years earlier, while Helen was still a child, she was forcibly taken from Sparta by Theseus. Theseus and Pirithous had decided that they were deserving of wives who were children of Zeus, and so Theseus decided to make Helen his wife. The abduction of Helen was a simple affair with no trouble encountered by Theseus and Pirithous, and so Helen soon found herself in Attica. When Castor and Pollux became aware of the abduction of their sister, they raised an army and marched upon Theseus' Athenian kingdom. So these are Greek mythologies, obviously been twisted and made complicated. So the judgment of Paris. All was well in Sparta, but events that were occurring in the world on the gods would soon have a profound impact on Helen. 3 goddesses were competing for the title of fairest, or most beautiful of all goddesses. These goddesses were Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Hera, the goddess of marriage, who was also the wife of Zeus. So we have this connection here with Helen, with Athena, and wisdom, beauty, as described in the Oera Linda. A judge had been appointed to make the final decision, which would be the judgment of Paris, named for a Trojan prince, Paris, a mortal known for his impartiality. The 3 goddesses who were to be judged decided not simply trust to the impartiality of Paris, and instead offered bribes. Athena would offer knowledge, Hera offered dominion over mortal realms, while Aphrodite promised the hand of the world's most beautiful woman. In the end, Paris chose Aphrodite as the most beautiful of the goddesses, resulting in Aphrodite becoming his lifelong benefactor, whilst Paris also gained the animosity of Hera and Athena. Aphrodite would also make good on her promise, and of course the most beautiful woman was Helen. And we all know the end result of the story. The link between the Oera Linda and Helen, Minerva being Athena from Athens. So also in the writings of Mino, when I came away from Athenia with my followers, we arrived at an island named by my crew Crete, because of the cities that the inhabitants raised on our arrival. When they really saw that we did not come to make war, they were quiet, so that at last I was able to buy a harbour in exchange for a boat and some iron implements and a piece of land. So many believe that the Trojan civilization founded the Roman civilization, and you can find that online, people's different theories. Scientists solved the mystery of the Etruscan origin. So the Etruscans were the beginning of the Romans. The discovery could have just settled 2,400-year-old debate. A new genetic analysis may have finally revealed the origins of the Etruscans, a mysterious people whose civilization thrived in Italy centuries before the founding of Rome. It turns out that the enigmatic Etruscans were local to the area with nearly identical genetics to their Latin-speaking neighbours. This finding contradicts earlier theories that the Etruscans for centuries spoke a now extinct non-Indo-European language that was remarkably different from others in the region, came from somewhere different from their Latin-speaking neighbours. Instead, both groups appeared to be migrants from the Pontic-Caspian Steppe, a long thin swathe of land stretching from the North Black Sea around Ukraine to the North Caspian Sea in Russia. After arriving in Italy during the Bronze Age, the early speakers of Etruscan put down roots, assimilating speakers of other languages to their own culture as they flourished into a great civilization. So let's not forget that the Khazarians or Gog-Magog are sons of Japheth, and so was Javan, who's said to be the father of the Greek Empire. I'm not going to go into depth of this information because I've done it before, but what I'm just going to show is the initial migration of the three tribes and the regions they held after Genesis. So Japheth moved into Europe around the same region. However, later on it was the tribes of Gog and Magog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, who moved into the Georgian, Ukrainian, that sort of Khazarian region. We're talking about early migration from the Ark, from Asia Minor, and from after the time of Babel. The Oera Linda explains about the flood. After 12 years had elapsed without our seeing any Italians in Alma land, there came 3 ships finer than any that were possessed or had ever seen. On the largest of them was a king of the Joniscan Islands, whose name was Ulysses, the fame of whose wisdom was great. To him a priestess had prophesied that he should become the king of all Italy, provided he could obtain a lamp that had been lighted at the lamp in Texland. For this purpose he had brought great treasures with him, above all jewels for women more beautiful than had ever been seen before. They were from Troy, a town that the Greeks had taken. So this is in the Oera Linda. And when we go to the Greek mythology, Ulysses' decade-long journey from Troy to Ithaca. Today, an intrepid yachtsman can trace Ulysses' almost mythical journey around the western Mediterranean. Odysseus, Ulysses' Homeric name derived from the wolf, implying he was a man, nimble with words and cunning in action. Ulysses, immediately after the destruction of Troy in 1200 BC, set sail northwest of Troy with his 12 ships squadron to plunder the land of Cicones, who were allies of the Trojans. Each ship with 12 oars, 10 to each side, carried at least 40 men. His 12-ship squadron consisted of 500 crewmen. Ulysses' men delayed too long and lost 72 men, 6 from each ship, when the Cicones gathered allies and attacked them on the shore. Land of the lotus eaters. The lotus is known to be one of the shamanic plants. Ulysses' squadron set sail, and a terrible gale from the north drove them southwards down the Aegean, past Cythera, and for 9 days they were swept along until they reached the coast of modern-day Libya. They landed at Jerba, the land of the lotus eaters. 3 men were sent ashore and consumed the lotus. Desiring to remain on land, they were brought on board ships and chained. Ulysses set sail with his squadron east of north. Now, obviously, the land of the lotus eater is Egypt, down near Libya. And the Oera Linda goes on to describe this, that Egypt was in existence at the time that this happened. So this is a very ancient information on the origin of the people of Japheth, is what I believe the Oera Linda is. Their oral and written history of how the people migrated from the Ark in Asia Minor to these regions, the different problems they had with other people, the Finns and the Khazars in this area, and their sea voyages. According to Genesis 9 and 10, the prophecies given to Japheth's people to be the coastal sea people. And we can see that in the Romans, we can see that in the Tyrians, who was one of Japheth's descendants. The Phoenicians were all seafaring people, and they were friends with the Shemitic people, in alliances with Shem, as the Bible says they lived amongst the tents of Shem, or Shem resided amongst the tents of Japheth. So here it says, "From the other Greeks you will have heard a great deal of bad about Cecrops, because he was not in good repute. But I dare affirm that he was an enlightened man." I wonder if that's related to Cyclops. One eye, an enlightened man. He had one eye, and his eye was open, and he was a lotus eater. Very renowned both among the inhabitants and among us, for he was against oppression. Unlike the other priests, he was virtuous and knew how to value the wisdom of distant nations. Knowing that he permitted us to live according to our own Asga book, there was a story current that he was favorable to us because he was the son of a Frisian girl and an Egyptian priest. The reason for this was that he had blue eyes, and that many of our girls had been stolen and sold to Egypt. But he never confirmed this. However, it may have been certain it is that he showed us more friendship than all the other priests together. When he died, his successors soon began to tear up our charter and gradually to use unsuitable statutes that at long last nothing remained of liberty but the shadow of the name. So we see that at this time Egypt was established. It clearly wasn't Old Kingdom Egypt, because Old Kingdom Egypt had mummies that were white with blue eyes. So Old Kingdom Egypt was established possibly by a different people. And we're looking at around the time of Athens and not ancient Egypt, which is Old Kingdom Egypt. So if you want to look into the Oera Linda book yourself, I'm not going to go any further on this. I believe it's the written and oral history of the descendants of Japheth, their story, their migration, their people. It shows the wickedness of Magyar or the Magi. So anybody who's proclaiming this Tartarian story that the Magi was the origin of mankind and this Tartarian technology, perhaps read the Oera Linda and think again. They are wicked people. Looking into this and the symbology of Freya, I can see that there is an obvious link there to the ancient goddess worship of the Sumerian, Babylonian, or Mesopotamian, Anatolian, or Asia Minor region, with Inanna, Ishtar, and all of the goddesses of that region. They use the same 8-pointed star. They are associated with lions at their feet and holding off serpents. So I think that it's clear there's a definite link between the people who wrote the Oera Linda and a connection with ancient peoples who migrated out of this region which the Bible points at as the landing place of the ark and the flood. If anything, the Oera Linda adds a little bit more information about those times and the flood on the earth. Earth changes and upheavals in the land and the continents. And, you know, in no way am I a pusher that the flood happened globally. It may have just been regionally, and it could even be associated to the Jordan Valley rift that it speaks of in the Bible, that the wells of the deep cracked open. And we know that there's the rift right along that region. It goes all around the earth. We have the plate crust. This is not a theory that's round earth theory. We know there's crust. We know the ring of fire, and we know that there is tectonic activity within these regions. So there's something there that perhaps this is where the cosmic egg or the global egg theory comes from, that there are cracks within the shell of the earth. We have the legend of the earth on the back of a turtle. Here's a picture of the turtle coming out of an egg. Then we have the legend of Tiamat, who is the primordial dragon, and the Orphic eggs, or the cosmic egg with the snake and serpent dragon around it. I have zero ability to prove the shape of the earth. To me, it doesn't matter, because what matters is what we know in our present environment, and the shape of the earth does nothing to affect that for me. Perhaps for some it's a paradigm shattering theory to find out that we've been lied to about many things. But personally, I can only know what my 5 senses experience in the material. There's a lot more I could go into here, but I just think that the Oera Linda book does not show the biblical writings to be false. In fact, it complements them, and that of the migration of peoples and the belief in one God. Although I think that through their migration out of the plains of Shinar and the Tower of Babel, they've brought this mother goddess system. Clearly, Freya represents Inanna, and Inanna is worshipped throughout these regions. You can see it through the migration from Sumeria. Goes into all the ancient religions of this region. Every single religion on earth comes from this belief system, and I think that comes from pre-flood. Why we have it, I don't understand, to be honest. And apart from the fact that in Alexander Hislop's 2 Babylons and many other scholars have shown that it comes from Babylon, and the story of Nimrod, who was the Sumerian Gilgamesh. Is there any truth in it? This story of the mother goddess, the father and the child. We know that it's a Messiah story. It depicts the story of man's redemption, and we know that that story was given to Adam and Eve and to Cain and Abel, and it would have been given to Seth's children and his descendants, who was Noah. Noah was pure in his generation, direct descendant of Adam and Eve. He would have known the story. His children would have known the story. Cain's children would have known the story. And perhaps the story has come from before the flood, and it was the religious system of the people of Cain. I'm just, who knows for sure, but just because Noah was pure in his generation, we see already in Genesis that one of Noah's sons had already become corrupt. What about Noah's daughter-in-laws? We don't know anything about the people that came out of the flood and whether they started to practice false religions, as even Jacob's wives brought idols out of Ur. So I think that along the lines, wicked men have made themselves Messiah, the pathway back to heaven, the Jacob's ladder back to heaven. Now, when I say Jacob's ladder, I don't mean that Jacob was trying to make his own way back to heaven. The dream Jacob had obviously was about his descendants, who in the end was Jesus, who created a way back to God, or for God to come down to earth. And as in the story of the ladder, angels were descending to earth and ascending to heaven. And we know that Jesus is that way to heaven, the connection between heaven and earth. However, in the esoteric sense of Freemasonry and in the Lucifer system, it tells us that we are able to climb or to reach heaven of our own efforts. And this is obvious through the Freemasonic literature. It's all through historical religious beliefs. Doesn't matter where you go. The story of the Bible is as ancient as the story of our creation, and the story of the Messiah is also. And what appears to be is that the creation, God's creation, there is a story he has created in his creation itself, which is the heavens, the moons, the stars, the sun, and ancient people appeared to know and recognize this. However, I believe that what they did was start to worship the creation opposed to the creator, because it suited their agenda to make their own way to heaven. I don't see any messianic sort of stories within the Oera Linda, just a righteous system of living by. However, that being said, we cannot reach God through our own righteousness, as we're told in the scripture. It's a matriarchal system. I'll just finish reading here. The oldest doctrine. Hail to all well-intentioned children of Freya. Through them the earth shall become holy. Learn and announce to the people, Relda is the ancient of ancients, for he created all things. Relda is all in all, for he is eternal and everlasting. Relda is omnipresent but invisible, and therefore he is called a spirit. All that we can see from him are the created beings who come to life through him and go again, because from Relda all things proceed and return to him. Relda is the beginning and the end. Relda is the only almighty being, because from him all other strengths come and return to him. Therefore he alone is the creator, and nothing exists without him. Relda established eternal principles upon which the laws of creation were founded, and no good laws could stand on any other foundation. But although everything is derived from Relda, the wickedness of men does not come from him. Wickedness comes from the heaviness, carelessness, and stupidity. Therefore they may well be injurious to men, but never to Relda. Relda is wisdom, and the laws that he has made are the books from which we learn. Nor is any wisdom to be found or gathered but in them. Men may see a great deal, but Relda sees everything. Men can learn a great deal, but Relda knows everything. Men can discover much too, but to Relda everything is open. Mankind are male and female, but Relda created both. Mankind love and hate, but Relda alone is just. Therefore Relda is good, and there is no good without him. In the progress of time, all creation alters and changes, but goodness alone is unalterable, and since Relda is good, he cannot change. As he endures, he alone exists, everything else is show. Among Finder's people there are false teachers, who by their own inventiveness have become so wicked that they make themselves and their inherents believe that they are the best part of Relda, that their spirit is the best part of Relda's spirit, and that Relda can only think by the help of their brains. That every creature is a part of Relda's eternal being, that they have stolen from us, but their false reasoning and ungovernable pride have brought them on the road to ruin. If their spirit was Relda's spirit, then Relda would be very stupid instead of being sensible and wise. For their spirit labours to create beautiful statues, which they afterward worship. Finder's people are wicked people, for although they presumptuously pretend among themselves that they are God, they proclaim the unconsecrated false gods, and declare everywhere that these idols created the world. and all that therein is greedy idols, full of envy and anger, who desire to be served and honoured by the people, and who extract bodily sacrifices and rich offerings. But these presumptuous and false men, who call themselves God's servants and priests, receive and collect everything in the name of the idols that have no real existence for their own benefits. They do all this with an easy conscience, as they think themselves gods, not answerable to anyone. If there are some who discover their tricks and expose them, and they hand them over to the executioners to be burnt for their calumnies, with solemn ceremonies in honour of the false gods, but really in order to save themselves, in order that our children may be protected against their idolatrous doctrine, the duty of the maiden is to make them learn by heart the following. Rhoda existed before all things and will endure after all things. Rhoda is also eternal and everlasting. Therefore nothing exists without him. From Rhoda's life sprang time and all living things, and his life takes away time and every other thing. These things must be made clear and manifest in every way, so that they can be made clear and comprehensible to all. When we have learned thus much, then we say further, in what regards our existence, we are part of Rhoda's everlasting being, like the existence of all created beings. But as regard our form, our qualities, our spirit, and all our thoughts, these do not belong to the being. All these are passing things which appear through Rhoda's life, and which appear through the wisdom and not otherwise. But whereas his life is continually progressing, nothing can remain stationary. Therefore all created things change their locality, their form, and their thoughts. So neither the earth nor other created objects can say, I am, but rather I was. So no man can say, I think, but rather I thought. The boy is greater and different from the child. He has different desires, inclinations, and thoughts. The man and the father feels and thinks differently from the boy. The old man just the same. Besides, everybody knows and must acknowledge that he is now changing, that he changes every minute, even while he says, I am, and that his thoughts change even while he says, I think. Instead, then, of imitating Finder's wicked people and saying, I am the best part of Rhoda, and through us alone we can think, we proclaim everywhere where it is necessary, we, Freya's children, exist through Rhoda's life. In the beginning, mean and base, but always advancing towards perfection without ever attaining the excellence of Rhoda himself. Our spirit is not Rhoda's spirit, it is merely a shadow of it. When Rhoda created us, he lent us wisdom, brains, organs, memory, and many other good qualities. But this means we are able to contemplate his creatures and his laws by his means. We can learn and can speak of them always, and only for our own benefit. If Rhoda had given us no organs, we should have known nothing and been more irrational than a piece of seaweed, driven up and down by the ebb and flood. So I'll leave it there. I think that the religion of the Frisian people, although righteous, is similar to all religions, that it seeks enlightenment, it seeks perfection of its own efforts. And the religion of Jesus, religion of the apostles and the sons of Jacob, says that we will have redemption and we will have a reunification with God. From the original separation, we'll be taken out of Babylon, we'll be taken out of these mystery religions, these mother goddess worships, and we'll become a separate people, a people redeemed being back in the presence of God. As the Apostle Paul says, that we have an inner and outer man, and that inner man grows. It's a seed that's given to us. It grows, it becomes, as they're saying here, changing through our lives and perfecting through our life. That's what we're here for in this world. If we come out of our lives not showing any fruit, not having made any talents from our endeavors in life, doesn't mean being someone special. You could be the lowest of the low and you can have reaped a massive harvest from the fruits of our toil and our labor. the fruits of our tribulation and what tribulation has refined in us. And the only way to do this is to be born of the Spirit. Because when Adam and Eve ate of this fruit, when the creation did this and were separated, they were dead. They were dead from this Spirit, which was given out at the time of Pentecost. Spirit of God, the redemption of mankind, and what I believe is the true meaning of the eternal flame, or the parable of the virgins. So yep, this is my take on the Oera Linda book. I think it's a real book. I think it's real history. I think it's from the writings of people of Japheth. And finally, just to finish this off, Ephesians 2:8-9, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. So no matter what we do, the flesh has been cursed to mortality and death. And if we look at the Oera Linda book and what I just read, being the original people of Greece, we can see the Greek philosophy of logic, that somehow we can be saved by our good deeds and our good works, being good people. And salvation does not come via good deeds and good works. It says, but God, who is rich in mercy because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised up together, and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. And as Jesus says in Revelation, I am the bright and morning star, I am the path, I am the gateway to returning back to this state that was the Garden of Eden, the kingdom of God. You cannot do it through logic or reason. For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world and the things which are despised God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. So thanks for listening, and see you in the next video.